China, Russia, the Iranian regime first and foremost, not to mention Hamas and Hezbollah. Right. They see daylight now between the administration and the Netanyahu government at a time when, look, America's enemies and Israel's enemies now more than ever are one and the same. We need to have a united front in the face of this Iranian-driven jihadist threat. And the Senate Majority Leader takes to the Senate floor to denounce our closest ally. So the daylight, whether we can say, look, the Biden administration, Netanyahu government can say there is no daylight, it's clearly there on display for the entire world and, more importantly, for our shared enemies to see.
Good evening and welcome to the Rosenberg Report. We're in Dallas, Texas tonight, here at the, TBN's beautiful and expansive new studios. It's my first time to be here, my first time in the States. As you guys know, if you've been watching the show, I've been on this 6-week tour, speaking at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, speaking at churches and conferences and doing media all over the country, talking about Israel after October 7th, the war that we're in on multiple fronts, talking about U.S. Israel relations, and no time like the present. Because tonight, the topic is train wreck. U.S. Israel relations are heading for a train wreck. And I use that term advisedly. This is not hyperbole. This is where we are. President Biden has been super supportive of Israel in certain ways. I've praised him when I can. He's providing weapon systems. He's providing political defense for Israel at the United Nations Security Council when people are trying to blast us and condemn us. But Biden is furious with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is cursing Netanyahu behind closed doors in the White House. And how do we know that? Because White House aides are leaking this to the mainstream media. That's how we know. Moreover, Biden is taking not veiled shots. He's taking specific, clear shots at Netanyahu's leadership. And now President Biden has blessed and said it was a great speech that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer just gave on the Senate floor late last week, in which Schumer calls for regime change in Israel. I'm not kidding you. Now, we're going to show you clips of this tonight, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, right, who's the highest ranking Jewish official in American history, in charge of the Senate. Obviously, he's liberal, he's a progressive, he's a Democrat, but he's been very pro-Israel in many ways over the years. But he gave a speech that was a blistering attack against Israel's democratically elected government. He called Netanyahu, he said that he was leading a pariah state, that he's leading Israel into being a pariah, that's a state that's opposed by the rest of the world. He says Netanyahu is pursuing dangerous and inflammatory policies, that he's influenced by extremists, and he's threatening to derail U.S. Israel relations. I want to break down the speech. It was a 47-minute speech. This was not an off-the-cuff, hot mic moment. It wasn't that he got, Schumer got caught saying something he didn't mean. No, this was a planned and deliberate speech blessed by the Biden White House, openly blessed by President Biden himself. And he calls for Netanyahu to leave office. He calls for immediate elections, and he calls for the Netanyahu government to be disbanded. And look, whether you like or don't like Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu, he is the democratically elected prime minister of Israel in an emergency unity government fighting a hot war on multiple fronts. And I just think it's despicable. I just want to say that up front, that the Senate Majority Leader, Jewish or not, would attack Israel's top official in a hot war. It's just insane. But I want to show you these clips, and we're going to begin with the fact that early in his speech, Schumer says to the American people, to the world, that there are 4 major obstacles to peace in the Middle East. One of those, he says, is Hamas. The other is Prime Minister Netanyahu. Take a look.
The 4th major obstacle to peace is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has all too frequently bowed to the demands of extremists. Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost his way by allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel. He has put himself in coalition with far-right extremists like Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and as a result, he has been too willing to tolerate the civilian toll in Gaza, which is pushing support for Israel worldwide to historic lows. Israel cannot survive if it becomes a pariah. Prime Minister Netanyahu has also weakened Israel's political and moral fabric through his attempts to co-opt the judiciary, and he has shown zero interest in doing the courageous and visionary work required to pave the way for peace, even before this present conflict. As a lifelong supporter of Israel, it has become clear to me the Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th. The world has changed radically since then, and the Israeli people are being stifled right now by a governing vision that is stuck in the past. Nobody expects Prime Minister Netanyahu to do the things that must be done to break the cycle of violence, to preserve Israel's credibility on the world stage, and to work towards a two-state solution.
Look, I don't agree with everything Prime Minister Netanyahu has done or has said, but that's different from realizing that he is the democratically elected leader of Israel. And Israel will call elections at the appropriate time. We're not a banana republic. We're not, some country that an American official at Schumer's level can just trash in the middle of a war. We're an ally. And I'm just sickened by the fact that Schumer would go after the leader of Israel in the middle of a war. I don't hear Schumer calling for regime change in Iran or in Gaza. I mean, he does say that Hamas shouldn't stay, but he doesn't talk about what should replace Hamas, except for a two-state solution. And we're going to get into that again in a moment, but I just want to give you a few more clips. You're not hearing Schumer call for regime change in Russia to get rid of Putin. You're not hearing Schumer call for regime change in China to get rid of Xi Jinping. The highest-ranking Jewish Democratic leader in the Senate is calling for regime change in Israel. It's just astonishing, but let's look at this next clip.
The U.S. government should demand that Israel conduct itself with a future two-state solution in mind. We should not be forced into a position of unequivocally supporting the actions of an Israeli government that include bigots who reject the idea of a Palestinian state. Israel is a democracy. 5 months into this conflict, it is clear that Israelis need to take stock of the situation and ask, must we change course? At this critical juncture, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel, at a time when so many Israelis have lost their confidence in the vision and direction of their government. I also believe a majority of the Israeli public will recognize the need for change. And I believe that holding a new election, once the war starts to wind down, would give Israelis an opportunity to express their vision for the post-war future. Of course, the United States cannot dictate the outcome of an election, nor should we try. That is for the Israeli public to decide.
Okay, so look at this. So Schumer is saying that he is demanding a two-state solution, that he's calling for new elections, that he's warning that Israel cannot succeed if it is a pariah state opposed by the rest of the world. And he's calling Netanyahu the main problem inside Israel. Look, there are a lot of Israelis who don't agree with Netanyahu, but there's a lot, obviously, that do support him and think he's the right guy for the moment to fight this war and win it. But this is an internal Israeli discussion to be had. I can't even imagine a scenario in which an Israeli leader would publicly call on Biden to step down from office and let Trump win. You know, that would be the equivalent if Prime Minister Netanyahu suddenly jumped into a partisan fight in an election year in the United States. But that's not what Netanyahu is doing. And again, I, others will have criticisms of Netanyahu, but America's job right now is to stand with its ally and call for the complete eradication of Hamas. Here's another clip that I want you to see.
If Prime Minister Netanyahu's current coalition remains in power after the war begins to wind down and continues to pursue dangerous and inflammatory policies that test existing U.S. standards for assistance, then the United States will have no choice but to play a more active role in shaping Israeli policy by using our leverage to change the present course. The United States bond with Israel is unbreakable, but if extremists continue to unduly influence Israeli policy, then the administration should use the tools at its disposal to make sure our support for Israel is aligned with our broader goal of achieving long-term peace and stability in the region. I believe this would make a lasting two-state solution more likely.
Again, this is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying that Netanyahu is pursuing dangerous and inflammatory policies. What are the policies? Get rid of Hamas, eradicate Hamas's military capacity to attack Israel, bring in a whole new way of governing in the West Bank and Gaza, and deal with the fight from the Iranian terror proxies on every side. That's Netanyahu's policy. And Israelis 100% agree with those objectives. And of course, bringing the hostages home. Are there disagreements on how to do it? Yes, there are those disagreements. But that's what a democratically elected society is allowed to do. And we shouldn't be pressured by Biden or Schumer. And I'm here with a dear friend and TBN's lead, not only journalist and news director, but also has been the lead on terrorism and war and all things Middle East for years. Erick Stakelbeck, great to be in the studio with you here in Dallas.
Yeah, on this side of the pond. We were just in Israel together a few weeks ago. Now we're here, and as you said, this beautiful new facility. Joel, it's great to have you here.
But we got to unpack this crazy speech. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry to you, but I try to be as nonpartisan as I can when it comes to Israel. I have strong views, as do you. But for the Senate Majority Leader to attack, he keeps claiming to be super pro-Israel, and I'm the highest ranking Jewish leader, but he went for the jugular for the democratically elected leader of Israel, Netanyahu, calling him an obstacle to peace, putting him on par with getting rid of Hamas and getting rid of Mahmoud Abbas, and we have to get rid of Bibi Netanyahu. Now, that may or may not be true by Israeli standards, but what's an American leader at that level pressuring a Democratic ally in the middle of a war to get rid of a democratically elected leader? What do you make of that?
Joel, number one, it was unprecedented. As you said, look, Israel's in the midst of probably its most difficult time since 1948.
Sure.
Ready to commence with the Rafah offensive to finally, hopefully, stamp out Hamas once and for all, facing a major war in the north on the Lebanon border with Hezbollah. And Chuck Schumer picks now as the time to denounce the leader of our closest ally on the Senate floor. It boggles the mind. And meanwhile, he's not calling for regime change in Iran, North Korea, China, et cetera.
Regime change in Israel?
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously? Now?
I think it boils down to, Joel, political. That sounds simplistic, but he was clearly acting as a proxy for the Biden administration. Now, he said the quiet part out loud, I guess you would say. This is what the Biden administration is talking about behind closed doors. And we see leaked reports of President Biden calling Bibi some very unflattering names, to say the least.
See it on Christian television, that's
exactly.
For sure.
And we're seeing these reports persistently emerge. So again, Schumer came out and the administration gave their blessing. And by the way, President Biden praised this speech afterwards, said it was a good speech. Yeah. So he went out and said what the Biden administration has been saying, again, behind closed doors. And to do this, and he fancies himself, Joel, as you said in the lead-in, as a defender of Israel, a guardian of Jerusalem, he's even called himself.
Right. He says his own name, Schumer, comes from Shomer, which means a guardian in Hebrew.
You're not living up to that name when you essentially denounce Israel's leadership in a time of war.
Right.
It's really unprecedented again. And Israel would never, Israeli leaders have never and would never wade into American politics like that and call for say, a new nominee to supplant President Biden. They would never do that. So this was just across the board something we haven't seen before.
Imagine a scenario in which Netanyahu or any other Israeli leader would come out and said, we're sick of the Democratic Party. We're going all Trump. The Democratic Party would go ballistic. And I think rightly so. Israeli leaders may have preferences internally, but we're a small country, 10 million people. The United States is 330 million people. It's the only superpower on the planet. Israel has never tried to go pick an open fight politically, in a partisan way, with American political leaders, with presidents. But that is exactly what the highest-ranking Senate official, a Democrat and a Jew, has done in Israel.
And Joel, you have to think that the enemies of America and Israel were taking notes. China, Russia, the Iranian regime first and foremost, not to mention Hamas and Hezbollah. Right. They see daylight now between the administration and the Netanyahu government at a time when, look, America's enemies and Israel's enemies now more than ever are one and the same. We need to have a united front in the face of this Iranian-driven jihadist threat. And the Senate Majority Leader takes to the Senate floor to denounce our closest ally. So the daylight, whether we can say, look, the Biden administration, Netanyahu government can say there is no daylight, it's clearly there on display for the entire world and, more importantly, for our shared enemies to see. It was a disaster on every level by Schumer.
I think it's a train wreck is coming between the Biden administration and the leadership of the Democratic Party, as well as some of the grassroots, the AOC crowd, the Rashida Tlaib and others.
And that's a good point, Joel.
And Israel.
Yeah, great point there. The far left, it seems that they are catering, Schumer, Biden, et cetera, they are catering to the far left wing of that party. They're thinking of Michigan and the possibility of losing Michigan over the Israel support. But that far left wing of the Democrat Party, some say it's very small. I believe it's growing. But at the end of the day, it has a lot of influence and it's very vocal. And the Biden administration clearly is very, very concerned about shoring up that left flank, which is almost uniformly anti-Israel.
Now, let's talk about the specific case, because at the core of what Schumer was talking about and this was not an offhanded comment that he made or, a hot mic moment. This was a 47-minute speech on the floor of the Senate, of which he runs. Yeah. So his main case is it's time to force Israel to accept a two-state solution. Let's unpack that for a moment. You've been studying Israel, the region, you travel there. We're talking about right now is Hamas is a terrorist organization that tried to commit genocide. So, and they're a democratically elected government in Gaza. And then you got the Palestinian Authority, where Mahmoud Abbas has 89% of Palestinians say that he's corrupt and should leave. What's the basis for rewarding those two cultures right now, the Palestinian culture in Gaza and the Palestinian culture in the West Bank, with sovereignty? Help me understand what that case would be or why it would be wrong.
And it seems to be an inclination on the part of Western leaders to impose a Palestinian state, whether Israel likes it or not. Right. Joel, Joseph Borrell, who's the foreign policy chief for the European Union, he actually used that term. We must impose a Palestinian state. Well, I think Israel has something to say about that. It's sovereign Israeli territory that would be snatched up to form this state. But the basis seems to be ignoring completely the events of October 7th, when war was declared on Israel by Hamas terrorists. Joel, this is a reward for a Palestinian society that, look, still polls show overwhelmingly supports Hamas and supports October 7th. This doesn't seem like a society right now, I'm sad to say, that is ready for statehood and sovereignty. We're just not there. And Joel, you know this better than anyone. You live in Israel. The people of Israel certainly aren't there. It's completely tone deaf on the part of Western diplomats, because the average Israeli on the street right now, a Palestinian state is the furthest thing from their minds.
One of the points I want to just follow up that Schumer makes is that he described that it's a minority, a small minority, he said, of Palestinians support Hamas, and therefore it's time to give the rest of the Palestinians what they need and deserve, which is a sovereign state. What do the actual Palestinian polls show on this topic?
Yeah, Joel, the numbers just don't bear that out. There was a poll in December that showed 85% of Palestinians in the West Bank, and that would be the hub, the breadbasket of that future Palestinian state, support what happened on October 7th.
85%.
85%. And overall, if you factor in Gaza, Joel, there's 3 out of every 4 Palestinians who support October 7th.
So first of all, Schumer has his facts wrong. If you're going to be the Senate Majority Leader and you're going to be the highest ranking elected Jewish official and you're going to trash Israel in the middle of a war, you might want to look up the numbers. But to say that Palestinians overwhelmingly support a peace with Israel when 75% support the genocidal attack on October 7th, it would be laughable if it wasn't so horrible.
Yeah.
But the other point is that, as you just said, 85% of Palestinians on the West Bank support October 7th's atrocities, with only 52% in Gaza support. So that's 30% more in the West Bank. 30 points more support October 7th. How do you build a Palestinian state based on people that are 3 out of 4, almost 4 out of 5, hating Israel so much they would support October 7th again?
Joel, you can't do it. Now is certainly not the time. It's a society that is thoroughly radicalized. And not only in Gaza, which was Hamas's main power base, obviously, but the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, where we've had, a little reported story since October 7th, thousands of arrests there of Hamas sympathizers as well. So,
but as a Christian, how do you, Eric, how do you express and think about compassion for Palestinians who have been under a terrorist regime in Gaza and a corrupt regime in the West Bank? How do you see that?
I think, number one, pray for them for sure. I think pray for new leadership. I think that's the key, Joel, new leadership, not only in Gaza, but in the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas, where, little kids are brainwashed from the time they're 3 or 4 years old to hate Jews. It has to stop. So leadership, I think, first and foremost, and just a complete de-radicalization in Gaza in particular. But hopefully a new visionary Palestinian leadership, if it's there, could set a new course for the Palestinian people. Right now, that seems very far away.
Especially with Saudi, Emirati, Bahraini, Moroccan support for a new way forward.